Hello? It's me.
Anybody out there? Hello?
It just feels like, why am I taking your daggers, brother? I love you, brother.
That's some bull. Let's get to what's real.
Black folks don't want to defend a system that has failed them, right?
But I'm going to tell you, somebody who is writing you a check for $5, that's not just a check, that's a vote.
It's like, who gonna go? Who all gonna be there?
The truth is that the South are not red states, they are oppressed states.
I just don't believe we're going to have any more free and fair elections.
Sister, we have never had fair elections.
They're stripping your name from the voter rolls.
For any listeners that's not in the family or have not been invited to the cookout, you should have tuned out by now.
This podcast is ridiculous today.
This is going to be a two-parter, so you guys be sure to tune in.
Native Land Pod is a production of iHeartRadio in partnership with Reasoned Choice Media.
Welcome
Welcome home, y'all. This is episode 72 of Native Land Pod, where we give you our breakdown of all things politics and culture. We are your co-hosts, Tiffany Cross, Angela Rye, and I'm Andrew Gillum. What's up, y'all?
Who is Tiffany Cross?
That's what I was trying to figure out. I was like, we got a guest on the show today named Tiffany Cross.
Tiffany
Yeah,
Cross.
I was giving you my
He's giving you his
best.
Florida.
This
My
Tiffany
best,
Cross.
my best.
That Florida
My
talking.
best. That's southern to the north.
Tiffany Cross is the one that went on air and said, I'm more trustworthy than you, bitch.
I heard y'all been tearing these people up on
That's what she said.
the cable news.
She said, I'm more trustworthy than you, bitch. That was Tiffany
Well,
Cross.
I'll go ahead and say that's my topic for the day. What you got on your mind, Angela and Tiff?
On my mind is some astounding data that is bringing us from what happened in 2024 with the election and where we are now. And for me, it was mind-blowing. There are the things that you have hunches about. And then when you see the numbers, you go, damn. So that's what I want to talk about today. We have Terrance Woodbury from HIT Strategies joining us, and Gary Chambers, who I hope has some time to talk about this Louisiana election Saturday.
Nice. That's going to be good. Tiff.
Well, I want to yield my time to the viewers because I know we have a couple of really good viewer questions. And I just want to echo about our guests. I'm super excited to talk to Gary Chambers and Terrance Woodbury. If you don't follow them both already, I strongly encourage you to do so because they have some really great insights for us.
I agree. Ditto. And so dittoing down on your priority today, Tiffany, we're going to kick off with a question. Let's go.
Hey, Angela, Tiffany, and Andrew. This is Monte from Maryland again. Angela, Tiff, great seeing y'all back on the news, schooling these jokers like you need to, so we appreciate it. Just had a few quick questions for you. One, do the Democrats have any donors other than sorors? You keep hearing about Republicans putting money into their candidates. Wonder if Dems have any. Two, do the Dems have anything like the Heritage Foundation that they can use, to develop plans or anything else? Because you rarely hear of anything like that. And finally, we've all had our frustrations with Chuck Schumer, but is refusing to donate to Senate Democrats until leadership changes a sound strategy? Does it help or does it hurt more? I got my opinions, but I'd like to hear yours. Thank you all for what you do, and welcome.
I'm going to talk about
like
Angela.
it.
I'm going to talk about Angela
I
because
like
she's
it.
laughing at this man.
We should talk about Angela. She's deserving.
Well, because
Everybody ain't get no checks from sorors.
he said
Oh,
sorors.
sorors.
And he is, of course, referring to
It's
George
spelled the
Soros.
same.
It is not
No,
spelled
it's
the
not.
same. No.
Yes, so
No. It's
Christ.
Sorors and they're Soros.
No,
And
and
he is
then he
a-
said,
No, it's not. It's spelled. It's said differently.
wait, can we run it
It's
back?
not
He
spelled
said
the same.
sorors. He said
Yes.
I'm messing
sorors. Do y'all got any other donors beside that damn sorors?
Yes.
I'm with-
so
I feel
George
you,
Soros
brother.
is who he's
I hear
talking
you.
about, who, of course, contributes a lot of money to left-leaning causes. And I think his question was, who else is funding some of these campaigns other than George Soros or Sorors, as some people may say, just like it's Cross in some areas and it's Cross in others.
Kraus.
Yes. So I'm sure my co-hosts have answers for this, but I just want to kick off and say, yes, there are other donors other than George Soros, and that is you, the people. And I say that because a lot of folks contribute to a lot of corporate entities, a lot of people with vested interests give the maximum across the board to a lot of candidates, and they're not necessarily supporting Democrats exclusively or Republicans exclusively. But even if they are, it's just, yep, this is the person running and they care about what I care about. So I'm giving the max and boom, 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 done. Which of course means a lot to campaigns. But I'm going to tell you, somebody who is writing you a check for $5, that's not just a check, that's a vote. That's somebody saying, I got 2 coins to rub together and I am giving it to you. And when you have 1,000 people who care enough about you to give $5, then that is a movement. And so when we ask these questions, we have to consider what is our own power. And I think that's what I always want to center our conversations back to when possible, is to say, how are we the architects of this democracy? And one way that is organizing, funding, door knocking, hitting the ground, which, I've been very open about having my challenges in this environment doing those things. But that is one thing that we can do. If it's $5 you can give, Andrew, you of all people know what that means and what a big difference that means when it's done in the macro and the micro.
Yeah, no doubt about it. Really, really good question, and one that we don't often within our movement space concentrate some time, energy, and effort on, which is who is funding our movement? And then on our side, what does the infrastructure then look like over here when it comes to funding? And I will say, first, in full disclosure, I know Mr. Soros and his son Alex, and actually a couple of his sons, and he was my largest donor during my primary race and my race for governor. So we certainly appreciate his contributions, but there are actually quite a few major donors on the progressive side. I won't start name checking, but I will say a lot of them also give anonymously. So they'll ferret their money through what we talked about last week, the super PAC organizations. Some of them will give to big, broad entities like a governor's association, and then the governor's association will disperse that money beneath it. To the other part of the question, and I think Tiffany and Angela can add here too, is what's our Heritage Foundation? Some might say the Center for CAP, the Center for American
Center for American Progress.
Center for American, I'm like CAP. Center for American Progress. For a long time, I worked for People for the American Way Foundation, which is also a bit of a catch-all of many of the issues. We got the NAACP, which again is not partisan, but when it comes to issues that are important to us, they represent. Change.org. Actually, the list can go on and on and on.
Who founded that amazing
warehousing
group? That amazing group.
Huh?
The really amazing group that was founded for young elected officials, YEO.
Oh,
who founded that
they
one?
exist. They exist for sure. But y'all, I don't know. Do y'all feel like there is a warehouse where sort of central organizing for leftists or the progressive side exists? And if it does or doesn't, do you think we need it?
I think Angela is an organizing center.
Oh,
yeah, for sure. I forgot to mention we have Angela Rye.
No, it's the people.
With those
it's
other
the
organizations.
People. It's the people. Shout out to the people. I'm going to say I would like to plug our podcast from last week, where we also talked about the role that campaign financing plays in votes on the House and Senate floor, and the ways in which people receive donations and how it sways their votes. I think it was a very informative discussion where we talked about that. While Soros didn't show up, but Tiffany Cross did. I think that it would be very informative. And I want to thank the gentleman for inadvertently giving me a laugh today. No, I'm not laughing at you, but that was funny as hell. I don't know why, but it had me in tears.
I liked it. It was a throwaway line for a billionaire. Anybody other than Soros?
Soros. Why everybody go to Soros? I was like, okay. But yes, I think that it is really important that we continue to have dialogue around the outsized way that contributions sway elections, sway votes, sway our body politic. And I think to the point, we do need more people that are willing to pay into a system, as long as that's how we have to play ball. Or we need folks who are willing to upset the system and turn that thing on its head, because as we talk about on this show all the time, the way of doing that thing don't serve us. So that's one thing that we got to pay attention
That's fair.
to. Yes.
That's fair. That's fair.
Yes,
and you know what? To the
all
organizing, there was an organizing question he wanted us to weigh in on,
back on
which was
Soros.
whether it's effective to starve off campaign contributions to incumbent well, he didn't say incumbent, but basically senators until there's a change of Democratic leadership with Schumer.
I would love to see that. Like, I think that would be excellent. But the problem is most of the people that the DSCC or orgs that the DSCC, the Democratic Senate Campaign Committee, calls on are moved by their business issues or their big issues, and they are going to continue to push those things because people are literally retained or hired to do exactly that. So that would be really tough. Again, going back to the point of like, at what point do we work to try to upset a system that doesn't serve everyone? Especially when it's been effective for those who have, political business, and their political business is still being attended to, like it was in that continuing resolution that Chuck Schumer and other 9 voted for.
That's right. Well, we also have a guest who has taken on that sort of Senate side as an outsider.
Yes.
Be interesting to see what it's like to go up against what are behemoth funding organizations as an outsider.
Well, I'm a little
sorry,
confused about the DSCC, the Democratic Senate Campaign Committee, and the D-TRIP, the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee. That these are the campaign arms for the House and the Senate. I'm a little confused as to how they work with the DNC, because a lot of the complaints people have is that these are the people who are the gatekeepers to contracts, which are often given to white firms. White firms are going to tell you how to go talk to folks like us. But even media buys, where they decide to place their dollars. Like, I guess, members have, Angela, you could speak to this. Members have call time where they're calling donors, essentially. And so if I get a call from, let's say, Eleanor Holmes Norton, that's my member of Congress. If I get a call from her and I say, yes, Congresswoman Norton, I will give you 20 of my hard-earned dollars. Is that going into her coffers as a candidate, or is that going into the D-TRIP?
Really, all members, every sitting member of Congress has dues that they have to pay to those campaign arms. So, and everybody's dues are structured differently based on how much money they raise, based on seniority. If you're in leadership, you have a higher bill, a higher membership dues bill. And so you could be doing call time to meet that threshold of paying those dues, or you could be doing call time because you have a race or because you're using your campaign money to go on tour. Like, for example, right now, AOC is doing this nationwide tour, and she's raising money through her campaign, but it's to fund that tour. So there are other things that you can do that are more discretionary with your campaign funds. If you're Republican, you could just break the damn law. But if you're if you're a Democrat, you have to still follow FEC guidelines and the actual law. So there's that. There was another thing that you asked at the beginning I was going to answer, but now I forgot what it was.
Well, I think you're communicating with me telepathically, because I asked that question for a reason, and it was for AOC. Because he's asking, like, well, what if we, cut off funding? And another alternative might be to not cut off funding if you have the money to spare, but to contribute to people you believe in. I personally would like to see Congresswoman AOC challenge Chuck Schumer in the Senate. I would like to see her go to the upper chamber on Congress, or in Congress, rather. I think we don't have a lot of young leadership in positions of leadership. And so I'm just saying, if you don't want to stop giving your money to anyone, you could start funding people who, maybe the D-TRIP or the DSCC don't feel are viable candidates. Because that's the other challenge. They also can control, well, we've got this, person running who we could feel is a more viable candidate than this progressive Black woman or this progressive Latina woman. And I think they've just helped create a shit show of our politics, quite frankly.
Well, since we talk about people we want to see challenge Chuck Schumer, you talking about in the Senate race, I would like to see somebody, because people been asking about alternatives, like who gonna go, who all gonna be there. I would like to see John Ossoff challenge Chuck Schumer in the leadership race. Now, I know he has a very competitive Georgia Senate race
Re-election,
to be focused on.
He worked his ass off.
This podcast is ridiculous today. And he didn't even do it through Soros. Now, Nick,
Says who?
Well, maybe not solely, but either way, I know that what's his name? George Soros got to be tired of being blamed for stuff he didn't even fund sometimes. But
even me, and he ain't never gave me no money.
I cannot have $1, friend.
Okay,
I'm taking up a love
we get
offering
paid
right now.
by Soros.
Soros. But can you, Nick, I just sent you a clip of John at a rally, his campaign rally kickoff this weekend, where more than 4,000 people RSVP'd. I don't know how many people ended up coming, but I think this is important. You know how we talk about politicians having the it factor sometimes?
Yeah.
Watch this.
His goal is not just revenge. He wants to use the government to crush the opposition. And this is actually something we have never faced before. Not like this. Before you elected me, I led a team that exposed corruption and war crimes. We exposed the truth in places where criticizing the government is dangerous, where whistleblowers and witnesses will only meet in secret, where protest carries the risk of prosecution. And the atmosphere in America under Donald Trump reminds me more and more of those places.
And that wasn't a clip I wanted to play, but sorry.
Oh,
but
well, then.
it was still fine. I think that we have to have somebody that has it. And Andrew, you have it. It's an argument that we have on here all the time. There are certain people that have it. Jon Ossoff has it. He is compelling. He is running a competitive race in Georgia and still said, I am not voting for this CR. I'm not going to do that. That's not what my constituents want me to do. That's not what the American people want me to do. I'm going to be bold. And if you can't understand a bold fighter right now, we just not on the same page.
Well, friend, I would almost co-sign
almost.
The whole idea of him running for leadership, new leadership, and someone with their own authentic voice. And my prayer for Jon Ossoff is that he continues to keep and grow his own voice and avoid the temptation to mimic who people may compare him to. He is not from Texas. He's not from Hawaii. And so far as I know, he's not from Kennebunkport, right? Or Nantucket. He's his own person, and he's got his own story. And so I hope he keeps his authentic voice real true. And y'all, he's going to need more than an authentic voice, because the state of Georgia, along with the nation, is going out of its way to make sure that a Jon Ossoff story cannot be repeated. Specifically in the state of Georgia, you all may have heard, the state of Georgia is about to undertake the largest, what is believed to be the largest purge of voters. 450,000 people being removed from the voter rolls. These are people who took time to register to vote.
Yeah.
Whether they voted in previous elections or not, the last two presidential elections or not, should be of no consequence. But they are adopting rules that say if you did not vote in the last two presidential elections, in addition to a number of other criteria that they're looking at, they're stripping your name from the voter rolls. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but every American citizen who has the right to the ballot box, access to a vote in the ballot box, can choose to exercise that right or not exercise that right. That our choice not to does not equal being summarily disenfranchised from the process. But that's what they're doing in the state of Georgia, and we've got to raise our voices. And then I know we want to talk a little bit more in Georgia, but very quickly nationally, Donald Trump signed an executive order this week trying to, by fiat, change election law around this country. And just two quick provisions. The largest and I think most impactful pieces here is that, one, he wants us who are registering to vote, he is requiring that we submit documentation to show that we are U.S. citizens. Documentation. The Brennan Center reports that there is roughly 10% of Americans, 21.3 million Americans, who don't have easy access to that information. If you're a woman who's married and you produce a birth certificate that has a last name different than the one that you now carry, what kinds of problems does that create for you in this process? Number two, they want no vote to be counted after Election Day, regardless of the fact that it can be submitted prior to. And y'all, if you don't understand the consequences of that, say you're in line at 7 p.m. on the East Coast and the polls supposedly close at 7 p.m. But yet you haven't had the opportunity to get inside and vote. At 7 p.m., they're saying, I don't care if you're in line. It's over. the election's over. You can go home, right? That's what they're saying to people who use the mailing system as a way to get their vote out. It will have impacts.
Can you say what happened in the mailing system this week, Andrew, with DeJoy?
I want you to say.
Well, the U.S. Postmaster General, DeJoy, resigned this week, which I thought good. He was horrible anyway. And a Trump appointee who's incredibly disrespectful to members of Congress every time he was called to testify. And I actually talked to my poor mail lady. I harass everybody around me. And every time I see her, we get in these 20-minute conversations. And I actually asked, like, how do you feel about him? Like, he wreaked havoc on the post office. So I thought, great, he's resigning. But no, not so great. Because now they could potentially privatize our mail system. Now, there is no indication that they would do that at this point. But we're in the land of anything goes. Anything is possible. Because I thought, well, why would he resign during the Trump administration? Like, you're back. Yeah. And they tried to get rid of him before, and he kept saying, I'm here to stay. Forgive my ignorance, because I don't know I don't know how he was able to stay and survive a Democratic
7-year, I think, appointment. Yeah. Cross administration appointment.
I don't know why he wasn't able to be removed under Democratic leadership, but he wasn't. But that makes a big difference, because if you consider mail-in ballots and what that means, and I'll be honest, our guest coming up, who I think Andrew's going to, or not Andrew, but Angela, I think you're going to introduce them. But Gary Chambers, I don't know that I disagree with him, but Gary has told us, because I've been like, it's all over, guys. Like, there's no more elections happening. This is the end. And Gary Chambers very, forcefully and perhaps rightfully so, said he's tired of hearing that. Like, you all are out here, this is his quote, you all are out here acting like elections are over. And there are 49.5 million Black people out there who believe that we will continue to vote, and that is our way to fight. And so when I hear things like this, when I heard Gary say that, it like inflated me. And then when I hear things like this, and I'm deflated again. I just don't believe we're going to have any more free and fair elections. So I'm really curious his thoughts on that.
I'm too. And Angela, Tiff did a toss to you to bring on our guests. I do think it's a great time to, one, invite them into this conversation around these changes around election law, because it will have reverberating impact. But would love to get into this conversation on what we did in 2024.
I just want to, just really quick, for those of you at home who are wondering why Joe Biden didn't get rid of DeJoy as the Postmaster General, you can look at the Postal Reorganization Act of 1970 for that. They are confirmed and have 7-year terms generally. Okay, now let's go to these guests. First, we have joining us Terrance Woodbury, who is Black America's pollster. He's the founder of HIT Strategies and has some amazing data to share with us today, not just reflecting on why Democrats lost in 2024, but where Black folks are right now, because sometimes somebody got to talk about Black data. This group has never been polled. We talk about it all the time. Terrance, we want to do one of your polls. Gary Chambers Jr. is also joining us. He is founder of Bigger Than Me. He is the champion in the South. Let me tell you, if there's one person that's going to flip a state black, I didn't say red or blue, he's going to flip it black. It is going to be Gary Chambers. Whenever he joins us on camera, Gary, your camera is off.
And get off
he is not a ghost of Christmas past. He is actually here in the building, y'all. And when he, there he is.
In his building. He in his building.
He's in our virtual home, and that's why we say welcome home, Andrew Gillum. But yes, Gary Chambers Jr., and he's going to talk to us, too, a little bit about the election coming up this Saturday.
And had an amazing ad, Angela. That amazing ad that we played and talked about.
On this podcast. And so we won't revisit it. We will tell y'all to go back and look at that clip.
Do we remember when that was? I don't even remember.
We were in New York because we had a nice salute to you.
Hey, guys, I just want to point out that we told them that they were going to start with us about 30 minutes ago. So let's jump into the conversation.
Sorry, you guys.
Welcome home, Terrance and Gary. I think Gary's
Thanks for having me, fam. It's good to be here on Native Land Pod.
I see you representing Mo House.
Always, all day.
Mo House.
Happy to have you guys. Let's get right into it. Who should we start with? Terrance,
Let's start with this data.
Yes.
Listen, thank y'all so much for having me. HIT Strategies has been pouring through this data, this post-election data, exit poll data, voter file data, and we've been sitting in focus groups with voters of color and young folks for the past couple of weeks since the election to understand what happened, why it happened, how we fix it moving forward. And one of the first things we see here is despite the valiant efforts of the Harris campaign, I was on the Harris campaign, For full transparency, despite the efforts of the Harris campaign, who was able to close some of the gaps that we saw when Biden was at the top of the ticket, she in fact closed a 22-point gap amongst young voters, an 18-point gap amongst Black voters. Despite those efforts, Democrats continue to underperform with all the groups that we consider our base voters. So we got 3% less votes overall, but that includes 6% less votes from young people, 5% less from young Black voters, 19 points less amongst Latino voters, 19 points, and 2% less amongst Black men. Shout out to Black men who tried to hold the line, and who had the smallest reduction across any other group of men. But I do want to talk about that 2% real quick, because while Joe Biden got 79% of Black men's votes and Kamala Harris got 77%, the concern for me is the trend over time, y'all. It's that over time we've seen 3 to 5 point less Black support amongst Black men until Barack Obama had 92%, Hillary Clinton had 82%, and Kamala Harris had 77%. And so I've been arguing that, just calling it sexism is kind of lazy analysis of what's happening. This has been ongoing over time, and Democrats got some work to do to bring these brothers, not just Black men, but men, bringing men back into the Democratic coalition.
Wow.
I think that that's so powerful. I know we can probably go to the next slide, but I think it's powerful to hear. One, we were all together recently, and there was a very heated conversation around whether or not it was sexism. Sure, sexism is at play, but you saw this consistent drop off from Clinton to Joe Biden, and that was at one of the higher turnout years. Joe Biden's year was actually an outlier, right? From what we know, the numbers were much higher. What do you think is the reason, Terrance, based on what you've heard, if it's not sexism, regardless of how we might feel about the numbers, with what the numbers say?
Yeah, look, there are several factors contributing to underperformance of men, but overwhelmingly, men are starting to identify the Republican Party as representing their values, representing the things that they care about. I don't want to negate sexism. In fact, the slide that's up here now has a very important question I think starts to explain explain where the Black community is on issues of gender and gender roles. When we ask the question, do you agree or disagree that men should be head of household, 66% of Black people believe that men should be head of household, including 59% of Black women, that's the majority, and 75% of Black men. I would argue that believing that men should be head of household is not a sexist value, right? It's a traditionally religious value. And it's one where we have to bring men along this conversation to explain that the role of gender in society is evolving, and there's a place for them in it. When Barack Obama was running for president and racism had the potential to undermine his candidacy, he didn't wag his finger at white folks and say, shame on you, right? He had a conversation with America about how we're not red states and blue states. We're not Black states and white states. And how even his grandmother, his white Hawaiian grandmother, held unconscious bias. And he offered an opportunity for America to move beyond that bias. Well, we didn't offer that to Black men. We said either you're with us or you're bad. Either you're with us or you're wrong. Either you're with us or you're immoral. We're telling them that their Bible is wrong. And so there's another way here to bring men, not just Black men, but to bring men along this journey as society is evolving, and to ensure that they know that it's not all masculinity is toxic and there's going to be a place for them in it, but we're going to have to define what that non-toxic masculinity is.
I was about to say, Terrance, some of this is, I hate if this is a minor point, but, okay, we were raised to believe that men should be at the head of the household. I wonder what it means functionally. Because I grew up with that belief as well. I just don't know how it plays out, right? Like, who's writing the checks? Who's turning the head when it needs to be, those sorts of things are, I would just say this about that statement of, do you believe that men should be head of? I think many of us cop to that, believe in it, subscribe to it, mostly, as you pointed out, through a religious premise. And if we had to write functionally down, what does it mean to have men as head of the household? I think everybody's list is going to look different.
Yeah.
Right. So I'm glad that probably isn't the question that you asked. But I also think that your point around the rise in men choosing Republican or the Republican Party as home or reflective, I kind of think it's the party you can be a member of and not be judged and not be held
That's
accountable.
exactly right.
That you can say what it is that you think in your innermost moments and nobody's going to cancel you. That it's safe because the stakes appear to be not as high with what you do or don't do.
No, I mean, I think that's exactly right. Masculinity has become so triggering on the left. I mean, I've had this conversation in groups of progressives who've asked me, well, what is a non-toxic version of masculinity? As if they don't know non-toxic men, as if I'm not standing in the room presenting this data, right? And so there are values like masculinity, like hard work, religion, patriotism, family, all these things that we have ceded to the right. I had a young man tell me in a focus group, anytime he sees an American flag on somebody's house, he knows they're white and he knows they're Republican. Well, we're not going to be able to just cede family values, patriotism, masculinity. I could tell you right now, all of those values are more important to my father than the Democratic Party.
Can I ask you really quick? By the way, this is quickly becoming, I just texted the co-host. I was like, this is my favorite podcast ever so far.
I know.
But
I'm so into it.
I'm really into it too. So thank you guys. Gary, I want to get you in here because I know there are some thoughts and feelings and ideas you have. Like you don't necessarily do focus groups, but you be in the streets with the people. So I want to hear from you on like not only the part about the head of the household, but also what you think is the cause of the shift. Now Terrance typing his ass off.
I was going to say, who is typing?
That's Terrance. Look at Terrance. Guilty.
Terrance straight in the slide over there.
He didn't want me to ask you a good question, Gary. He know I can't focus. That is so rude. But no, I'm just playing. But the head of household piece, especially being in the South, but also what you think is the reason, like when you talk to people, what's the reason for them to have even either stayed at home in 24, particularly Black men, or to have voted against their interests and voted with the Trump party?
I think it's, first of all, thank you all for having me today.
Thank you, brother, for being here.
An important conversation. I have struggled with what I feel is getting the voices of Black men to be heard in this season, right? I think that there's been a period of time, and Black men, the patriarchal structure of America, has been guilty of muting women and their perspectives for so long that once we began to sit back and listen a little bit, our voices in response have not been heard. And I think you see that in the reactions in elections, right? I think that overwhelmingly, we see that Black men want to be for the policies and the things that Democrats are for. However, if you are telling me that I have to be for something, well, damn it, I'm a man, right? I ain't got to be for nothing. And so what you see in some men is a automatic rejection to the fact that I get to have a say in what is happening here, right? We have been talked at so much rather than talked to. When we talk about the 20% of Black men who are on the other side, we spend so much time talking about them and so little time valuing the 80% of Black men who were on the side of Democrats, who have been supporting Black women. I'm from a city, Baton Rouge, where for over a decade, the majority of our elected officials in the Black community were Black women because Black men and women put them in power. That's how we ended up with a Sharon Weston Broome as the first Black woman mayor of our city, right? And her career would not get there if Black men had not supported her. So I think that acknowledgement of Black men has to happen at a greater pace, at a louder volume than we have had in the past. When the vice president was running, I tell you personally, there are people I reached out to in August saying, I think we should be having some roundtables with brothers. We should be doing some things. I was told in nice ways and not so nice ways by certain people, like, look, we ain't focused on that right now. You know, we need to get white America, middle America, all of this. And one of the things I've said to Democrats in the beginning from day one is, if your base is Black men and Black women, if that is the base, you take care of them before you go see about anybody else, right? You make sure that those people are satisfied, that they feel valued. And in our community, Black women are always more loyal than Black men are going to be in these situations. If you come testing us with certain situations, we're going to look for the other option. Okay? Black women have a lot more. Black women have a lot more to sacrifice through this government, right? The government isn't trying to take away our right to see a doctor the way that we need to. So there are certain things that Black women cannot negotiate with in this scenario that Black men can. The other thing I think is the Democratic Party sucks at an economic message. When you talk about this conversation about who's the head of household, Black men are concerned about how they provide for their families, how they show up in the world financially, and how we do that. When we look at 59% of Black women saying that they see that role is the head of the household is for a Black man, that is because they see the role of a Black man as providing for his family and creating stability for his family. Whether that is a 50-50 makeup of the household or taking care of 100% of the bills, because there's a lot of Black women in America who don't pay a bill because a Black man pays them all. Okay? Those Black men are not praised or considered enough in the conversations. And that is a part of the problem, because we spend so much time listening to the podcast bros who have gotten so much voice in this hour that we have abandoned the voices of the men who have been anchors in our communities for decades. The reason I learned how to follow a Black woman's leadership, my pastor was a Black woman who had a Black husband who was 6'5" and 250 pounds, who would pound you on the top of your head if you said anything about his wife. And when he was the lead, I never struggled with seeing a Black woman in leadership, because the person who taught me my faith was a Black woman, but she was supported by a strong Black man, right? And that was an example that was shown to me from infancy until this day. We don't let the Jim Howards of the world get enough shine today.
I have, I'm so grateful to you brothers for being here. Because I have so many thoughts on everything you just said. And Gary, every time you speak, it almost feels like I'm in church. I feel like you always, delivering a word. So I really appreciate your perspective. So I'm saying that if you will give me a little bit of space and grace to vent a bit, because I see these slides and I try to be really honest and unfiltered on this podcast. So one area where I feel like I filter myself is when I'm talking about Black men, because I never wanted to come across like I'm putting Black men down, even though I believe we rightfully have some righteous frustrations with our brothers. In transparency, I'm writing about this. So y'all will read about all of these thoughts, and that's why I find the data so fascinating. One, when they say when Black men say their thoughts about being the head of the household. Okay, you believe Black men should be the head of the household. Does that mean a Black woman cannot be the head of a nation? And I wonder what the dichotomy is there. Two, yes, Black men overwhelmingly are Democratic voters. I would be remiss if I didn't remind everyone that when this country had an opportunity to elect the first Black man to the highest office of the land, everyone in the Black community were right behind him. Post-primary, everybody rallied behind him. You did not hear droves of Black women saying, well, wait, before I give him my support, what's he doing for me? I don't want to hear about Black men. What are you doing specifically for me as a Black woman? No, we were right behind President Obama. We were right there campaigning, organizing. And sometimes it does feel like Black women, we keep the greater good in mind. Our interest is not so self-centered. When we organize, we are organizing for the greater good. It seems like the Republican Party is able to pick off these Black men because of something individual, something that they will individually get. We've seen example like this time after time. You take Snoop Dogg with Rick Caruso in Los Angeles. It was something that he specifically got. You can take, I don't want to center on celebrities because they're, this is across the board, but it's something that speaks specifically to them. As a woman, I'll be honest, I do have some belief in what people might call toxic masculinity. One, I don't want to drive ever. Like, somebody else needs to always drive me. 2, I ain't never pumping no gas. I don't never want to pump. I don't want to touch gas. Somebody else is doing that. 3, I don't want to take out no trash. Like, I do believe in traditional gender roles in a lot of ways. And I think there is something interesting happening, which is what I'm exploring in my writing. There's something interesting happening in this dichotomy between Black men and Black women, where it is an immediate animus upon meeting each other. What are you trying to take from me? What is it you're going to give to me? Even these terms like a high value man, high value woman. And that kind of toxic thinking has penetrated our politics in a way where you are throwing a tantrum in the voting booth, again, because of something that you are dealing with personally. And look, I done been killed, okay? I done been wronged by Black men. I've probably, popped off at the mouth to Black men in ways I shouldn't have. I can still consider the greater good in my policy and in my politics. And it doesn't seem like that exists always. So I'm not putting brothers down, but I do believe we have righteous frustrations that need to be addressed. And I think it's a family conversation, not one to have on a round table in front of folk who ain't kinfolk.
Can I just say this really quick before you guys weigh in? It's just a filter. I will tell you that, Tiff, I'm the one that pops off at the mouth at everybody. So I'll just own that. It don't matter if you're man, woman, boy, child. It don't matter. But I'm working on it. But I will say that I normally in conversations, I'm normally the friend that sounds very conservative about Black men. I'm normally the one that, Tiff is already nodding. I'm normally the one that's running to be like, well, did they really do it like that? What actually happened? Like, I'm very protective of Black men in that way. And I gotta say, I wonder if these numbers for Black men, their performance in the election for Kamala Harris in 24 would have looked different if Kamala Harris or a Kamala Harris would have run around the same time as Barack Obama or before. Follow me on this. I think that a lot of people threw everything aside for President Obama because he appeared to be the change, the hope we believed in, the reparations we deserve, the justice we'd finally see, the economic opportunity that we've always deserved, like all of these things.
Or the Black guy that looked like white people will vote for.
Okay.
Exactly.
Okay,
Yeah.
that wasn't part of this particular point, but I hear you. I think that's very fair. But this point was just on what Black people laid aside because we thought that this was going to finally be our opportunity. We were told to wait until his second term. So we waited until his second term. And when that second term came to an end, we were still on the chopping block. We still had to sacrifice the most. We still didn't get our needs met necessarily. I'm not saying
It was worse in some ways.
Okay.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
So let's say all that. Although Trayvon Martin could have been his son, right? And Amazing Grace at Emmanuel after Emmanuel 9, Mother Emanuel massacre. All I'm saying is some of the intense frustration with the parties reached a fever pitch after nothing really changed, especially when you go in the hood under a President Obama. So then you're like, okay, well, Hillary Clinton, they're like, I don't know. Now, if he couldn't do it, I really don't know. Then Donald Trump.
And she was super predator lady.
I'm clear. Donald
Right.
Trump, super predator lady. See, I peeped that too, Gary, but I'm with you. Also, she was born on my birthday, so shout out to Hillary. But I will just say this. You have those two, then you have Trump, and then you have this narrative that under Trump, people were doing better because they weren't prosecuted yet for them PPP loans and, all of the other things that check felt like it was going to go a little further. They didn't really understand the congressional role. They don't really remember it feeling like that under Joe Biden. Joe Biden is the same Joe Biden of the crime bill, to bring that back in, Gary, but they still pushed it aside. Particularly in 2020, because there's this George Floyd moment. But the George Floyd moment was lost too. And so we're back at square one. And I just have to wonder if in the flatness of data, Terrance, not in your skills, but in data, just looking at it on paper, if we don't miss all of the nuances, all of the times where the party we were told had our best interests really didn't, or at least we didn't feel like it did. Our circumstances didn't remarkably change. Did she get penalized for all of the baggage of the party and not so much because this was a woman at the top of a ticket? I'm not saying nobody was saying that BS, But I got to tell you, there are a lot of folks who are close to me who held their nose and voted for the party, not because Kamala Harris was at the top of the ticket. That was
As you
longer
guys
than I meant for it
answer,
to be.
I would love for you to address some of the things I was saying, because I want to be clear. I'm not representing a party. I'm not talking about Democratic politics. Like, the party to me is completely irrelevant to the point I was making. I'm talking about the dynamic between Black men and Black women and the infrastructure of the country, not necessarily Democrat, Republican. But I think both are super relevant. So we'll be quiet and let you guys take all of that me and Angela just threw at you, because I want to hear your response to both. Whoever want to take it.
I'll jump in to Angela's point. I think, and I wrote this down in response to some of what Tiffany was saying. I think that we have to own the failures of Black leadership. That the only way that Black people can make you pay for not delivering is to either vote for someone else or not to vote. And that there are people willing to make the party or the politician pay a consequence for not delivering for the things that they've said. One of my lawyers, who has a Juris Doctorate from an HBCU, had hard up arguments with me about whether or not he would vote for Hillary Clinton. Okay. Before, and it had nothing to do with her being a white woman. Okay. It had to do with the things he believes she helped orchestrate against us, and whether or not the Democratic Party would deliver for Black people after Black folks had shown up the way that we did for Obama. Okay. There are Black men who are tired of every time saying, we'll wait till next time. There are people ready to abandon the ship, like say, burn it all down. We don't want to be a part of any of your party structure. I think that comes into play with some of the odds that we have, Tiff, within our structure with each other, that some of the men in our community have just made a decision. I'm opting out of all of that because they're not listening to us. They're not working with us to the things that they said. I also think that we never talk about the elephant in the room, that Vice President Harris was married to a white man. That was a huge conversation for a lot of Black men. Okay. Barack Obama was all that he was, but Barack was married to Michelle from the South Side of Chicago. And when things got twisted and rocky with the Black community, Michelle Obama came into the Black community and had conversations with Black women and Black people to settle the storm and bring Black people along with Barack Obama. Vice President Harris had Doug, and he's a great guy for her, and it's a great partner. And we don't get to choose her partner for her. She has a right to marry who she wants to. But we have a right to have a perspective about who that partner is and what conversations are had about Black people when you are laying on the pillow at night about these conversations. Most people feel like Michelle Obama was checking Barack about whether or not he was doing certain things for Black folk. Now, whether or not we feel like that, we know if that's true or not, we don't know, but most Black folk felt that. You don't get to feel that with Vice President Harris. We also did not hear Black women criticize that piece of the conversation the way that we know Black men would have been criticized if we had a white wife. Now, as somebody who believes in the Black family unit, that if you gotta, the only way to do this and be about this all the way for me personally, is to be with a Black woman. There's a lot of Black people who share that belief and cannot see outside of that. And we have to have the conversations within our community and talk to them about the policies that make these things worth sacrificing some of the things that we don't want to put on our shelf. The last thing I'll say, to the point about the conflicts that exist between us as Black men and Black women, there are some toxic brothers in our community. There are some hateful brothers in our community that do awful things to Black women. We should call those things out. We held a mass gathering, Jamal Bryant, Wes Bellany, myself, in Atlanta. We gathered hundreds of brothers to talk about the election, the path forward. There were some brothers who shared some perspectives that we did not agree with. Some of those perspectives about the vice president and other things. When those were called out, we directly addressed those. But we gave brothers the space to vent in a safe space where they could get it off their chest, even if it's not true, even if it's sexist, even if it's hateful. But other brothers could say to you, you know that's a lie, right? You know that's jacked up, right? And to say that in the council of other men, where other men can and all of the things that we do, that let another brother know, like, look, you're a little sideways right now. Sisters, y'all can't do that, but we do that so much on the internet that it demeans our relationship more than it builds our relationship. And I think that we don't own that there are some hateful sisters out there, right? That there are some sisters who do not like black men, who will speak venomously against any black male leadership. And that is counterproductive as well. Now, both of us have been hurt by each other. The question is, who is better to get us to the other side? Is it anybody else other than us? And the answer is no. It's always going to be sisters and brothers together, and we got to figure that out.
I love that, Gary. Terrance, what do you say?
He got a slide about it.
I
Let's
know.
blow that slide back up.
Yeah.
This is
All right,
church.
y'all,
Like this need to be like a full day sermon. It's so good. Y'all are great.
Listen, y'all, we in the family conversation now. For any listeners that's not in the family or have not been invited to the cookout, you should have tuned out by now because we are deep. We are deep in the family conversation now. I want to say a couple of things in response here. Number one, and I have to make this point every time I talk about these gaps, the gender and generation gaps in the black community. Voters are the consumers, right? Yeah. Candidates that are running for office are the product. You don't blame the consumer when they stop buying your product. You make a better product. Woo. Right? We need to present candidates and policies that better appeal to the consumer and not blame the consumer for not buying. That's the first thing. We have to, when I hear both of us have hurt each other, we have never hurt each other more than racism and a patriarchal society have hurt us. And so this is what unifies us, is a shared pain and a shared struggle. When I look at some of these slides, because this is why HIT Strategies, the polling firm that I started here, we have to engage these conversations with this compassionate curiosity. Because when you start with judging how our voters feel, then it's too hard for us to get to the solution. And there's a couple things that are on this slide that I want to point to. One is the pain that brothers are feeling, right? When you said things haven't gotten better, it was a young man in the focus group, Angela, that said something very similar to you. When he said, my hood ain't getting no better under Obama, it ain't getting no worse under Trump. So what Biden and Harris got to do with me? Well, in fact, for some brothers, their hood got better under Trump, or at least that's what they believe. On this first graph on this slide, when we asked this question, was your life better under President Biden or better under President Trump? The overwhelming majority of black voters, 71%, said their lives were better under President Biden. But 29% of black people told us months before Election Day that their lives were better when Donald Trump was president. 29% of black people said that, including, y'all, 41% of brothers. Said 41% of young black men said that their lives were better when Donald Trump was president. And so we need to acknowledge that pain. And Donald Trump is giving these brothers and these, not just brothers, but voters who are cynical towards a system that have failed them, he's giving them a reason for that pain. In the second two numbers that you'll see on this graph, 59% of black voters agree that the gains of the LGBTQ community have come at the expense of the black community. The second number here, 64% of black voters believe that the gains of the Latino community have come at the expense of the black community. What do I see when I see these two numbers? I see the trans ad.
Yeah.
Right? That trans ad that said that she's for them and they and I'm for you. But the rest of that ad also said, and they're using your tax dollars to pay for trans surgery. Listen, that's not an anti-LGBTQ sentiment for black people to believe that other communities are getting more because we're getting less. That's just pro-black. That's just us saying we're not getting what we need. And Donald Trump is offering a reason for that pain. And that reason is because the trans folks are getting more than you and the immigrants are getting more than you. When I see that black folks believe that the advances of the Latino community have come at the expense of the black community, what do I see there? Immigrants are taking black jobs.
How do you account for the intersectionality, though, Terrance? Because to say that the LGBTQ is making gains against black folks does not account for the overlay. In the Venn diagram, there are, in fact, black members of the LGBTQ community. Same with the Latino community. There are Afro-Latinos who exist in this country. So I don't know. How was there a
That's
question
too
that spoke to
nuanced.
that? It's too
That is
nuanced. Say
quite
more.
nuanced.
But how is that
is-
so nuanced? Because I mean, there are everybody knows some
I
gay
think
people
when
in
you
their
talk-
family. You know, like how is
Yeah,
it too
But
nuanced?
I think when you're talking to regular people, that when you start whittling down all of those different things, they don't hear that. They don't hear all of those different subsections. They hear like what Terrance just said. They hear the ad as it was.
Yeah, I mean, I'll go even further because this was research that we did with Dr. David Johns and National Black Justice Coalition, and he made sure that we explored that intersectionality. And in fact, we asked the question, do Black queer people identify more with their Blackness or their queerness? And we believe that Black queer people identify more with their queer identity than their Black identity. And so we're not even when we're exposed to that intersectionality, we reject it.
Yeah.
And so this is some of the messaging and work that we have to do when we talk about immigration policy. We're not talking about Black immigrants. That's the messaging that we have to do to talk about the fact that immigration is not a Latino issue.
Can
Right.
I ask you, Terrance, really quick on this? The first thing that comes to mind looking at this slide is, did they feel this life was better? Did they read this? Did they see a video of it somewhere? Like, did you ask the question about, like, when you say that your life was better, give me an example of how?
That's exactly right. That's exactly right, Angela. Yeah, we did. So this is a poll question that we asked back in August, but after that we started doing focus groups where I moderate these focus groups.
I know.
And so I am probing. These are hard probes. No. Give me a list. What exactly was better in your life? Don't just brush over it and say it just, business was better. It just felt like, tell me what was better for you. And what we discovered, Angela, is overwhelmingly when people say that things were better under Trump, what they meant was things were cheaper under Trump. That's often what they were saying. That's oftentimes what they were saying.
And we were in a pandemic.
That's exactly right.
Wow.
I know I'm not a panelist, and I love
Yes, you are.
having you brothers here.
Andrew.
No. Can I say this? It's the reason why I would love to relax my voice so that we can hear more of yours. But I do have just a point to make around, some of this, which is it's easy when you can very, very quickly obfuscate from what might be your blame when somebody else shows you another place for it to go. And I don't know if that's exclusive to gender or not. I think as people, we do that. So some of this makes, that kind of sense. It also, when you consider Trump's time in office, the pressure valve got taken off of a lot of us, right? We didn't have to show up at 8 o'clock every day into an office wearing clothes we don't normally feel comfortable in. We weren't being offered not one, but two stimuluses that showed up in different ways. There wasn't rent relief, and relief also being offered from home owners. The kind of tax incentives that showed up during the pandemic, which I would argue should be here all the time, around children's tax credits. I mean, you felt more money in your pocket because you had more money in your pocket, quite frankly, for a lot of people. And so there's just something very clear, practical, touchable about that. And then Democrats come along saying, don't believe your lying eyes, don't believe your lying experience. It was really worse. And the truth is that, going layers beneath is not going to be helpful here when the simple answer actually meets my need. So I don't have to go through layers of explanation. Those of us who understand policy will say, over the long term, I'm willing to bet you, your grandmama told you this a long time ago, you get nothing for free. The systems they destroyed over the long term will cause irreparable harm to our communities. There's no doubt about it. But you can't convince me to care about tomorrow when I'm just trying to survive today. And so those arguments fell largely on deaf ears. And then there's the argument that just never showed up. And that was to this issue of trans. I think the Black community could have been just as open to an argument that said, if you dropped your kid off at daycare as a boy and you picked him up as a girl, turn around the car, take that kid back because you picked up the wrong one. And then remind us that, you know what? They would like you to believe that fewer than 0.003% of this population is the reason why the groceries cost what they cost, the housing costs what it costs, that we can't get access to the things that we ought to have access to is because of a little boy or a little girl who's deciding whether or not they're in the right body. But if we interrogate that, y'all, that ain't my issue. I didn't wake up with it with the first thing on my mind, and it wasn't the last thing on my mind before I went to bed. But there was a complete absence, a complete reluctance, a complete inability to just meet them, the other side of that argument, and say, you know what, that's some bullshit. Let's get to what's real. No, we're not going to legislate hate by targeting legislation in a state that affects 3 people out of a state of 19 million. That's not who we are. They ain't where we going. So the shrinking, I would say, from the fight, it's hard to lose a match when you're showing up on every round. But if you choose to step out, you're going to lay out, you're going to lay down, you're going to back up and think that we're going to do the hard work to make the other argument, well, think again. You send people to, listen, with Donald Trump, he's lying constantly. If he's talking, he's lying. But the answer isn't to then go mute on the other side and say, oh, well, you need to point it out. You need to name it, claim it, so I know how to name it and claim it when I see it.
Yeah, listen, there's a couple of really important points you made there, Andrew. And the first is that when people are in pain, they need someone to blame.
For sure.
Right?
Yeah.
When someone is working twice as hard to get half as far,
For sure.
when someone is following all the rules and doing everything that they were supposed to do, and especially millennials, right, who graduated in a recession, who are burdened by student loan debt, who ain't never bought their first house, never started a family, never done the things that generations before us were able to do. Well, we need someone to explain this pain. And Donald Trump came forth with a reason for their pain, being all them other DEI and other people and trans people and immigrants. And in response, Democrats said, we have a policy agenda for you, right? To a bunch of voters that ain't never believed.
Masculinity has ruled for a long enough time, got some pain?
That's
Welcome
exactly
to my
right.
life.
That's right. And the policy, I've learned through this work that policy is not a narrative, because especially for voters that don't believe our promises, don't believe our policies, if you can't tell me why my life sucks, then why would I vote for you to unsuck my life? Right? And Donald Trump is giving them a reason for their pain. And the alternative that I'm offering, that I think is the Democratic reason for the pain, is the other graph on that slide that showed that 73% of Americans believe that greedy corporations and billionaires are hoarding wealth, are rigging the rules to make themselves richer, right? And so the problem is that the person that makes $1,000 an hour has convinced the person that makes $20 an hour that their real problem is the person that makes $7 an hour, right? And so we can't ignore the problem statement. Why does their life suck? Why are they working so hard and not getting ahead? And I believe that problem is that the wealthy is not the least amongst us. The problem is that the wealthy are hoarding the wealth and making it and creating pain for everyone else.
Well, you talk about blame, Terrance, and sometimes it does feel like that Black men blame Black women for some of their pains, and this is not conjecture. This is not hyperbole. Like, we have personally experienced this.
I think y'all hear it the most because you're the closest thing to us.
Yes. So let's say we're in the same home. I can see that.
Really good,
and yes, you all are our counterparts. Like, we are family. We are linked in our pain, in our lineage, in our heritage, in our ancestry. It is a unique relationship that Black American men and women have with each other. But like, you take something like Angela and I and our group of friends, like if we go on vacation, the way that Black men respond, the gossip around who we may or may not be dating, the way that Black men, who the kind of men they think that, we should be dating. Somebody did a whole podcast on, who I've never met, don't know this person, but did a whole podcast on the kind of men that I date. And men have dropped comments, Black men in my comments, like, the kind of men they anticipate that I date. Angela, you talked about being protective of Black men. And I think you're protective of Black men you're friends with and you hold the line. Those same Black men who you don't know, who you're not friends with, who you might protect in any other circumstance, will flood your feed with comments about you being a Democratic shill, or about, well, that's why Byron Donald said, whatever do you want in the Breakfast Club, And it's, I don't know. It just feels like, damn, why am I taking your daggers, brother? I love you, brother. I'm in this fight too. They with you like they with me. And guess what? When I fight, I'm fighting for me and you. I'm not fighting you. And even this idea that Vice President Harris married a white man, The conversation is, how dare she leave us? Not how dare we let her get away. I happen to know a little bit about her dating life, and I know that she dated plenty of Black men. And she was not always treated well by those Black men. Some names you know, some names you don't. And so she found love where she found it. But again, it's how dare, and I just want to say, we have some of the highest endogamy rates in our community. We don't typically marry outside each other. But when that happens, we're punished for finding love. We are punished for wanting love. And in the podcast bro space, these very toxic conversations with people who have no idea what they're talking about, going back and forth, drawing up these crazy scenarios, and it's a bunch of insults to each other. That same toxic energy penetrated our politics the past 2 election cycles. And I don't know what to do about it. What I love that you said, Gary, is who else is going to solve this other than us? I want to solve it. I don't know how.
I want to, you troubled my soul a little bit for 2 seconds. And I think that, and I want to say specifically, when Black men, if we are in a conversation where we talk about all these young Black men who are marrying these white girls on college campuses, right? There are never Black men in my circle that come out and justify them making those choices, right? Because then that would be us saying that it's okay to leave Black women. I think for me, there's not an option, and I've never dated outside of my race in a serious way. So there's not an option that I would consider outside of Black women for me personally, right? So when some of us hear that rebuttal, that why did we let her get away? It would never be an option, anything else for me, ever. And I think that there are those of us who have that level of commitment to each other. And that is what we are expecting in return, right? Because the example that Black men gave Black women to choose in Barack Obama was a full Black package. And I think that there are some folks who want the same thing. Now, this is a conversation that's awkward, especially as somebody who's run for office that wants to get white folks to support me again, is having in a public space. But we need to have these conversations because they impact our body politic. They really do intensely. I also think we got to get back to really loving each other and celebrating each other.
Yes.
We've built so many ways that we have segregated ourselves against each other as Black folks. And I think what Terrance's data says is that we want to know that you're Black first. Before you are a woman, before you're a man, before you're gay, before you're trans, before you're anything else, are you focused on your Blackness and the conditions of Black people in this community and in this country? And how do we make the material conditions of Black people better? And once you qualify yourself as Black Latinx or Black trans or Black this, you have now segregated yourself into something that allows you to get a classification that we don't collectively have.
That's fair.
And our community has not checked off these boxes yet. So I don't really have time to hear about your box because the collective box has not been addressed yet. And
I'm sorry, Gary, please finish your point.
I think that's one of the things that we got to really get back to. I'm Black first. Yeah. Before I'm a man, before I'm a Christian, before I'm anything else, I am Black. Before my mother and father knew that I would be a boy, they knew I was Black. Okay? Before any other decisions could be made, we start there. And if we start at that place as sisters, as brothers, I think we can get a whole lot of our conversations moving forward because we accept our gay brothers and cousins.
Gary, you hit on something there around the Black first. It reminded me of a conversation my wife had with me around some frustration she was having at work. At the time, she worked for a very senior white female in the Democratic Party in Florida, office holder. And she was getting a lot of criticism because she a number of her white female colleagues couldn't understand how she could be for Barack and the way that she was and not for Hillary in that primary. And she was like, this is not a consideration. I'm a Black woman first. But I also, there is some subtext that I think we haven't expressed here that I think you got to when you said we just need to know. The criticism of Barack Obama largely early in was that, one, he was not raised in a traditional Black American experience. Growing up in Hawaii, spending time in California and then NYU and so on and so forth, we couldn't trace ourselves. We couldn't trace ourselves through him. And therefore that created some suspicion about, all right, who is this dude? We heard some of that through Reverend Jackson, some others in some off mic moments. Never really for everybody's consumption, but it was certainly our community understood it. And very similarly, I think, Kamala Harris, it was, to the extent that I heard conversation about her partner, it was more about how you going to be at Howard for 4 years around the best of us and then still not choose us. And of course, this gets at nothing of what Tiffany's point is, which is, how many of y'all had a shot and then blew your shot and all the heartache, pain led her to an opening that did find and create love for her. But this knowing, this instinctive knowing who you're dealing with, this craving of people just want their politicians to be like them. They want to know that they're normal. Trump is appealing because he's saying the same shit and doing saying the stuff out loud that I'm saying with my group of friends and in the whatever. That kind of association isn't new. I think people have always craved that. I want to know that you put your pants on one leg at a time, just like me. And that when you run into struggle or hardship or this, that there are some default places that we know you're going first before you choose other options. So, and I don't think anybody's strange in that. I think white voters do it. I think all voters want to know who you are and what you're made of. So when we heard all throughout the cycle, voters want to know, but who is Kamala? And I think a lot of us read that as it's because she's Black. And I don't think it was that simplistic. I think Black people wanted to know, who is she? Just like we wanted to know, who is he with Barack Obama, who had an experience that I can't even relate to as a Black person having grown up in this country. And so that thirst is real. And if there were takeaways from it, it is folks they want to be able to trace you. They want to track you and trace you so that they know for the decisions that have yet to come, that they instinctually feel that you've got some options that you're going to consider, even if you're not considering them out loud before you make a decision. And I want to know that as a Black person, that one, you're gonna have an experience in this country that will have some resonance with mine. Yeah. So that when you're confronted by the question, that you're going to have some sensibilities and sensitivities that reflect my lived experience too, and not just theirs.
This conversation is so good. We're going to close out the podcast here. This is going to be a two-parter. So you guys be sure to tune in. We're going to split this podcast in two. So you guys be sure to tune in on Friday. We'll drop the second part of this conversation because it's so good.
What is normally our mini pod, it'll be a continuation of this conversation. We know that you will enjoy it, hopefully as thoroughly as we have enjoyed it. With that being said, I think y'all agree. Our takeaways for this week are probably just listen to what we just talked about the last hour plus, right? And we'll have it all done. Remember, always, always, always remind yourself and all of the friends that you have recruited to listen to this show to leave us a review. Subscribe to Native Land Pod. We're available on all platforms and YouTube. New episodes drop every Thursday and Friday with solo pods Monday and Tuesday. If you want more, check out Spolitics and Off the Cup, the other shows on Reason Choice Media. And don't forget to follow us on all social media and subscribe to our text, our email list, our website, nativelandpod.com. We are Angela Rye, Tiffany Cross, and I'm Andrew Gillum. Welcome home, y'all. There are 586 days until midterm elections.
Thank you for joining the natives. Intentional with the info on all of the latest. Rye, Gillum, and Cross connected to the statements that you leave on our socials. Thank you sincerely for the patience. Reason for your choice is clear. We're so grateful. Took the oath to execute roles. Yeah, faithful. Preserve, defend, and protect the truth, even if painful. Welcome home to all of the natives. We thank you.
Native Land Pod is a production of iHeartRadio in partnership with Reason Choice Media. For more podcasts from iHeartRadio, visit iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to your favorite shows.